Japanese general disappeared after Manila in 1945. 79 years later, hidden Thai coastal villa found. March 17, 2024. The Andaman coast of Thailand, Phang Nga Province. A construction crew breaks ground for a luxury resort development along a secluded stretch of coastline, 40 kilometers north of Phuket. The excavators tear through dense tropical vegetation that has reclaimed the land for 8 decades. At 9:47 a.m. local time, Foreman Somchai Ratnakorn signals his crew to stop. The excavator bucket has struck something solid beneath 3 meters of earth and tangled banyan roots, not rock, but concrete. By noon, Thai archaeologists from Silpakorn University arrive on site. Dr. Panada Suksawat, a specialist in World War II Pacific Theater archaeology, immediately recognizes the structure's signature. Reinforced concrete walls, 40 centimeters thick, constructed in the architectural style used by Japanese military engineers between 1942 and 1945. The structure extends 23 meters along the coastline, built into a natural limestone outcropping that would have provided perfect concealment from aerial reconnaissance. Over the following 72 hours, the excavation team carefully removes decades of accumulated sediment and vegetation. What emerges is a remarkably preserved villa compound. 6 interconnected rooms, a cistern system still containing brackish water, ventilation shafts cleverly disguised as natural rock formations, and a subterranean tunnel extending 80 meters toward the waterline, an escape route to the sea. March 21, 2024. Interior Chamber 3. Dr. Suksawat's team discovers a steel document case embedded in a false wall behind what appears to be a collapsed bookshelf. The case measures 40 by 30 by 15 centimeters, its surface oxidized but structurally intact. Serial number JA091945M, Japanese military issue. Inside the case, preserved in oiled silk wrapping, identity documents bearing the seal of the Greater East Asia Co-Prosperity Sphere, property deeds registered under the name Takeshi Yamamoto, dated July 1945, a collection of personal letters written in Japanese, 43 black and white photographs, and a leather journal containing 186 pages of handwritten entries spanning from May 1945 to December 1961. But it's the military identification papers that stop Dr. Suksawat cold. The photograph shows a man in his early 50s, stern-faced, with the distinctive bearing of high-ranking military officer. The name on the documents reads Takeshi Yamamoto, merchant. Yet tucked behind this false identity card is another document, older, more official, bearing the imperial chrysanthemum seal. Lieutenant General Masahiro Fujita, Imperial Japanese Army, commander of the 14th Area Army Logistics Division. Last known location, Manila, Philippines. Official status, killed in action February 12, 1945, during the Battle of Manila. Body never recovered, presumed destroyed in the Intramuros district conflagration. Dr. Suksawat cross-references the photograph on both documents. Same facial structure, same distinctive scar above the left eyebrow, same cold, calculating eyes. The merchant and the general are the same man. The historical record declares Lieutenant General Fujita died 79 years ago in the burning ruins of Manila, one of thousands of Japanese officers who perished during the brutal urban combat that destroyed the Philippine capital. Allied intelligence closed his file in 1946. War crimes investigators marked him deceased. His name appears on memorial walls in Tokyo honoring the war dead. But the evidence before Dr. Suksawat tells a different story. The journal entries extend for 16 years beyond his supposed death. The property deeds prove he purchased this coastal compound in July 1945, 5 months after his official death date. The letters, addressed to someone named My Dearest Akiko, describe a life lived in hiding, watching the ocean, waiting for a reunion that the writer knows will never come. Lieutenant General Masahiro Fujita didn't die in Manila. He escaped, and for nearly 2 decades he lived in this hidden villa on the Thai coast under a false name, with secrets that died with him. The Thai Department of Fine Arts immediately seals the site. Within 48 hours, representatives from the Japanese Ministry of Foreign Affairs, the Philippine government, and the United States Army Historical Division arrive in Phang Nga. What they're about to uncover will rewrite one of World War II's most carefully documented officer casualties and reveal an escape network that helped dozens of Japanese officers vanish into Southeast Asia during the war's final months. If you want to see what investigators found hidden in the villa's tunnel system, what Lieutenant General Fujita recorded in his journal about the final days of Manila, and how he orchestrated one of the most meticulous disappearances of the Pacific War, hit the like button and subscribe, because this story goes deeper than anyone imagined. Lieutenant General Masahiro Fujita, born April 3, 1893, in Yamaguchi Prefecture, Japan. The second son of a minor samurai family, Fujita entered the Imperial Japanese Army Academy at age 16, graduating in 1912 with distinction in logistics and strategic planning. His personnel file, declassified by Japanese Defense Ministry archives in 2018, describes him as methodical to the point of obsession, brilliant with systems and supply chains, and possessing a remarkable talent for languages. He spoke fluent Chinese, passable English, and later learned Tagalog and Thai. Fujita's early military career was unremarkable but steady. He served in Manchuria from 1932 to 1937, where he earned recognition for establishing efficient supply routes across difficult terrain, a skill that would define his military value. Unlike many of his contemporaries who sought glory in combat commands, Fujita understood that wars were won by logistics. Bullets, food, fuel, medicine. These mundane necessities determined victory more surely than battlefield courage. By 1941, at age 48, he had risen to the rank of Major General and was appointed to the logistics staff of the 14th Area Army, responsible for supply operations throughout the Philippine theater. When Japan invaded the Philippines in December 1941, Fujita was among the senior officers who orchestrated the supply chains that kept 150,000 Japanese troops fed, armed, and operational across the archipelago. His promotion to lieutenant general came in April 1943, an unusual achievement for a logistics officer. The promotion papers, discovered in Allied archives in 1978, note his exceptional ability to procure and distribute resources under increasingly constrained circumstances. This was military bureaucratic language for a darker truth. As Allied submarines strangled Japanese supply lines, Fujita became expert at extracting resources from occupied territories, often through requisition policies that bordered on plunder. But Fujita was no monster in the conventional sense. His contemporaries described him as quiet, withdrawn, almost scholarly. He avoided the social gatherings that characterized Manila's Japanese occupation hierarchy. He drank sparingly, kept no mistress, and lived with monastic simplicity in his quarters at Fort Santiago. His obsession was his wife, Akiko, and their 2 daughters, Yuki and Hana, ages 12 and 9 in 1944. The family lived in Tokyo's Minato district. Fujita hadn't seen them since December 1941, 3 years of separation, documented in dozens of letters preserved in the Fujita family archives held by his grandson, Kenji Fujita, who granted interviews to Japanese NHK investigators in 2024. The letters reveal a man desperate to return home, increasingly aware that Japan was losing the war, and terrified for his family's safety, as American B-29 bombers began reaching Japanese cities. His worst fears materialized on the night of March 9, 1945. Operation Meeting House. The firebombing of Tokyo, 1,600 tons of incendiaries dropped on the Japanese capital, creating a firestorm that killed an estimated 100,000 civilians in a single night, the deadliest air raid in human history. Akiko Fujita, age 42, died in the Minato district fires. Yuki, age 13, was found dead beside her mother's body. 9-year-old Hana's body was never recovered, likely incinerated completely in the firestorm that reached temperatures exceeding 1,000 degrees Celsius. The news reached Manila on March 17, 1945, via diplomatic cable. Lieutenant General Masahiro Fujita received notification at 14:30 hours. According to his adjutant's diary, discovered in a private collection and published by the Japanese Historical Review in 2019, Fujita read the message without visible emotion, dismissed his staff, and locked himself in his office for 18 hours. When he emerged on March 18th, something fundamental had changed. Colonel Hideki Tanaka, Fujita's deputy, later told American interrogators during the 1946 Manila war crimes trials. The general was always controlled, but after that day he became like a machine. No emotion, just calculations. He spoke constantly about contingencies and alternative outcomes. I think that's when he decided. Decided what? To survive. By March 1945, the situation in Manila was catastrophic. American forces had liberated most of the city through February, but the battle had been apocalyptic. The Japanese forces, under Admiral Iwabuchi Sanji's command, had refused MacArthur's expectations of a quick withdrawal and instead fought a bitter urban defense that reduced Manila to rubble. Over 100,000 Filipino civilians died. The Intramuros district, the ancient walled city where Japanese forces made their last stand, was almost completely destroyed. Official records indicate Lieutenant General Fujita commanded logistics elements defending the port area district during the battle's final week. He was supposed to have been coordinating ammunition distribution and food supplies for the trapped Japanese defenders. His last confirmed radio transmission was February 10, 1945, at 22:15 hours, reporting Allied tank advances near Pier 7. 2 days later, February 12th, massive explosions ripped through the port district as Japanese forces destroyed supply depots to prevent capture. American forces found the area devastated, buildings collapsed, fires raging, bodies unidentifiable. In the chaos of Manila's final agony, Lieutenant General Fujita vanished into the flames. The American Intelligence Assessment, filed March 1945 and archived at the National Archives in College Park, Maryland, concluded. Lt. Gen. Fujita Masahiro, presumed KIA, Port Area, Manila, February 12, 1945. Body not recovered. The Japanese military concurred. Fujita's name was added to the list of officers killed in the Philippines. His military pension was paid to his surviving relatives, a sister in Osaka who had survived the war. Memorial services were held. He became one more name among the 518,000 Japanese military personnel killed in the Pacific War. But Lieutenant General Masahiro Fujita possessed advantages most doomed officers lacked. First, his logistics expertise meant he knew every supply cache, every hidden warehouse, every secret depot in the Philippines. He knew where gold reserves had been stored, the accumulated plunder of 3 years of occupation. Second, his language skills meant he could move among Filipino, Chinese, and European populations without immediately revealing his identity. Third, his methodical nature meant that if anyone could plan an escape during chaos, it was him. And fourth, most critically, he had nothing left to lose. His wife and daughters were dead. Japan was clearly losing the war. The emperor would likely face trial. The homeland would be occupied. Everything Fujita had served was disintegrating. Between February and April 1945, while Manila burned and American forces consolidated their control, Lieutenant General Fujita executed a plan he had been developing since receiving news of his family's death. It was a plan that required perfect timing, absolute secrecy, and the willingness to abandon every trace of his former identity. It was a plan that would keep him alive and hidden for another 16 years. February 9, 1945, Fort Santiago, Manila, 06:30 hours. Lieutenant General Masahiro Fujita stands in his office overlooking the Pasig River. American artillery pounds Japanese positions 3 kilometers to the south. The building shudders with each impact. Through the window, he can see smoke rising from a dozen districts, the city dying in increments, block by block. His adjutant, Captain Yashiro Matsumoto, enters with the morning reports. Ammunition stockpiles critically low, food reserves depleted, medical supplies nearly exhausted, casualty rates unsustainable. The numbers tell the story that pride prevents most officers from acknowledging the battle is lost. It's only a question of how many days remain. Fujita issues his daily orders in his characteristically flat tone. Redistribute ammunition from the university district to the port defenses. Consolidate medical supplies at 3 central locations. Prepare demolition charges for all remaining supply warehouses. Deny resources to the enemy. Standard procedures for a doomed force. But after Captain Matsumoto departs, Fujita removes a leather document case from his desk's locked bottom drawer. Inside are papers he has been preparing for 3 weeks, since March 17th, since the telegram about Akiko and his daughters, since the moment his old life ended. Identity papers for Takeshi Yamamoto, merchant from Osaka. Travel permits issued by the Occupation Authority, backdated and bearing genuine seals that Fujita, as logistics commander, has access to. Letters of introduction to Chinese merchant families in Manila's Binondo district, families whose cooperation Fujita had secured through a combination of business arrangements and quiet coercion during the occupation years. Bank account numbers for funds held in Portuguese Macau and neutral Switzerland. Accounts that Fujita had secretly established using gold diverted from army stockpiles. And a detailed map of escape routes through the Philippines, routes that Fujita had personally surveyed under the guise of logistics inspections. The plan is simple in concept, devastatingly complex in execution. Die officially, survive actually. Disappear in the chaos of Manila's destruction, then use the underground network of collaborators, bribed officials, and desperate survivors to move south through the islands, eventually reaching neutral territory. From there, establish a new life under a new name, far from war crimes tribunals and victors' justice. Fujita has no illusions about his moral position. He is abandoning his post, deserting his emperor, betraying his oath. In the samurai code he was raised to revere, he should commit seppuku, ritual suicide, rather than face the shame of Japan's defeat. But samurai honor died in the ashes of Tokyo with Akiko and his daughters. What remains is simply survival instinct and meticulous planning. February 10, 1945, Port Area, Manila, 18:00 hours. Fujita conducts his final inspection of the port district defenses. Captain Matsumoto accompanies him, along with a security detail of 6 soldiers. They move through devastated streets, past Filipino civilians huddled in ruins, past Japanese defensive positions manned by exhausted, hollow-eyed soldiers who know their dead men waiting for the inevitable. At Pier 7, Fujita descends into a warehouse complex that officially doesn't exist on any inventory, a secret depot that he personally established in 1943. The underground chamber contains items Fujita has been accumulating for 2 years, long before he consciously planned his escape. A logistics officer's paranoia translated into insurance. 40 kilograms of gold bars from the Philippine treasury, Portuguese escudos and American dollars, medical supplies, preserved food, civilian clothing and weapons. items selected for portability and utility rather than military value. Also present in the chamber, a man named Chen Wei-long, a Chinese-Filipino shipping merchant who has been on Fujita's payroll since 1942. Chen speaks Japanese, Tagalog, English, and several Chinese dialects. He has connections to smuggling networks throughout Southeast Asia, networks that continued operating throughout the war, moving goods across battle lines because profit recognizes no allegiance. The conversation is brief. Chen confirms the arrangement. A small fishing vessel will be waiting 3 kilometers south of Manila Bay's entrance on the night of February 13th. The vessel will carry cargo, human cargo to Mindanao Island, where connections to another network will move the cargo further south. Payment: 10 kilograms of gold, half now, half on completion. Chen produces a map marking the rendezvous coordinates: 14, 4,423 degrees N, 120, 9,135 degrees E. Fujita provides the first 5 kilograms. Chen departs through a tunnel that emerges near the waterfront, one of dozens of such passages that crisscross Manila's port area, originally built for smuggling, now serving as escape routes for rats and men. February 11, 1945, Fort Santiago, 0300 hours. Fujita cannot sleep. He reviews his plan repeatedly, searching for flaws. The escape route requires him to stage his death convincingly enough that American intelligence stops looking for him, evade Japanese forces who would execute him as a deserter, navigate through Manila's chaos without being killed by stray fire, angry civilians, or random violence, reach the coastal rendezvous point, trust Chen Wei-long not to simply steal the gold and betray him, successfully navigate through American naval patrols to reach Mindanao, continue through the island chain to neutral territory, likely through Indonesia to Thailand or Indochina. Each step contains multiple points of catastrophic failure, yet the alternative is certain death, either in Manila's final convulsions or on an American gallows after war crimes trials. Fujita knows his logistics operations contributed to Filipino suffering. He knows that tribunal investigators will find evidence connecting him to requisition policies that starved civilian populations. Better to vanish than face that reckoning. February 12, 1945, Port Area, 14:30 hours. The Americans are closing in. Artillery strikes intensify. Japanese positions collapse along the southern perimeter. Admiral Iwabuchi orders the destruction of all remaining supplies and facilities. Demolition teams plant explosives in warehouses, fuel depots, ammunition bunkers. The port area will become an inferno. Fujita oversees the demolition preparations personally. He places charges in building after building, ostensibly following orders, but also creating the conditions for his disappearance. At 19:00 hours, he sends Captain Matsumoto back to Fort Santiago with routine reports. He retains only 2 enlisted men as security, men he has carefully selected. Private First Class Takeshi Sato, age 23, from Hokkaido. Private Kenji Ishida, age 21, from Kyushu. Both men have disciplined records but no particular loyalty to imperial ideology. Both men have families in Japan and desperately want to survive the war. Fujita has spoken with them carefully over the past week, probing their attitudes, assessing their desperation. At 20:00 hours in a warehouse near Pier 7, Fujita presents them with a choice. Die here in Manila within days, or help him disappear and share in enough gold to buy new lives. The conversation lasts 17 minutes. Both men accept. The plan requires timing measured in minutes. Japanese demolition charges will detonate at 22:00 hours. American forces will advance into the port area by dawn. In the chaos between explosion and invasion, Fujita and his 2 companions will become ghosts. February 12, 1945, 21:45 hours. Fujita changes into civilian clothing, simple Filipino work clothes that make him anonymous. He removes his rank insignia, his medals, his officer's sword, the physical symbols of Lieutenant General Masahiro Fujita. These he places carefully on his desk in the Port Area Command Post, along with his personal seal and a brief note indicating his intention to die honorably defending the position. He burns all documents connecting him to the secret depot, to Chen Wei-long, to the escape plan. He keeps only the identity papers for Takeshi Yamamoto and a small leather-bound journal with blank pages, a journal he will fill over the next 16 years with thoughts never meant for other eyes. At 21:55 hours, Fujita, Sato, and Ishida descend into the tunnel system beneath the port area. They carry packs loaded with gold, currency, supplies, 40 kilograms each, the maximum they can move quickly while remaining mobile. The tunnel extends northeast, away from the demolition zone, toward the Pasig River waterfront. 22:00 hours. The demolitions detonate. The explosions ripple across the port area in a choreographed sequence of destruction. Warehouses collapse. Fuel depots erupt into fireballs. The night sky over Manila turns orange and black as fires merge into a single massive conflagration. The concussions travel through the earth, shaking the tunnel walls, raining dust and debris on the three men moving through darkness. 22:17 hours. They emerge from the tunnel exit near the river's edge, 3 kilometers from the main demolition zone. The city burns around them, but this particular waterfront section is temporarily empty, a gap in the chaos where no one is watching. A small boat waits at a rotting pier exactly as arranged. The boatman is a Filipino who works for Chen Wei-long's network. He asks no questions, merely gestures them aboard. They push off into the Pasig River, moving downstream toward Manila Bay. The boat's engine is muffled, barely audible beneath the sounds of distant explosions and small arms fire. They navigate by starlight and burning buildings, staying close to the northern shore where shadows provide concealment. February 13, 1945, 01:30 hours, Manila Bay. The small boat reaches the bay's entrance. American warships are visible in the distance, dark shapes against darker water, their presence indicated by masked lights and the occasional searchlight beams scanning the shoreline. Japanese coastal batteries still control portions of the bay's southern edge, making American patrols cautious. The boat turns south, running parallel to the coast about 500 meters offshore. It's a dangerous middle position, close enough to shore that Japanese forces might fire on them as potential enemy infiltrators, far enough that American patrols might spot them as fleeing Japanese. They move slowly, engine at minimum power, praying to gods none of them believe in anymore. 03:20 hours. They reach the rendezvous coordinates. Chen Wei-long's fishing vessel is waiting, anchored in a small cove invisible from the main bay. The vessel is a traditional Philippine banca, a fishing boat with outriggers, 30 feet long, battered and salt-worn, absolutely anonymous among thousands of similar craft. Its name, painted on the bow in faded letters, Perlas del Mar, Pearl of the Sea. Chen himself is aboard, along with a 3-man Filipino crew. The transfer takes 8 minutes. Fujita, Sato, and Ishida board the fishing boat with their packs. Chen nods once, says nothing, and signals his crew to raise anchor. The small boat that brought them from Manila turns back toward the burning city, its boatman to be paid later if he survives, written off as a casualty if he doesn't. By 04:00 hours, the fishing vessel clears Manila Bay's entrance, heading south into the open waters of the South China Sea. Behind them, Manila continues to burn, a funeral pyre for a city and a civilization and an army. And somewhere in that inferno, according to official record, Lieutenant General Masahiro Fujita dies, his body consumed by flames, his life ended in honorable service to emperor and empire. But the man who was Lieutenant General Fujita stands at the stern of Perlas del Mar, watching the orange glow on the northern horizon fade as distance increases. He feels nothing. No triumph at his escape, no guilt at his desertion, no fear of what lies ahead. The part of him capable of such emotions died with Akiko and his daughters. What remains is simply a biological organism executing a survival plan with methodical precision. He removes his military identity papers, the final physical connection to Lieutenant General Masahiro Fujita, and drops them into the dark water. The papers flutter briefly in the boat's wake, then sink beneath the surface, gone forever. Takeshi Yamamoto, merchant, continues south toward an uncertain future and a hidden life that will last another 16 years. April 2, 2024. Silpakorn University Forensic Laboratory, Bangkok, Thailand. Dr. Panada Suksawat arranges the documents recovered from the Thai coastal villa across 3 examination tables. 2 weeks have passed since the excavation at Phang Nga. The steel case's contents now rest in climate-controlled preservation containers, each item cataloged, photographed, and analyzed with techniques that would have seemed like magic to the man who hid them 79 years ago. The forensic team includes Dr. Suksawat, document specialist Dr. Hiroshi Nakamura from Tokyo University, flown in specifically for this investigation, handwriting analyst Professor Maria Constantino from the University of the Philippines, and Lieutenant Colonel James Morrison from the U.S. Army's Historical Division, a military historian who has spent 30 years researching Japanese officer disappearances after the Pacific War. The identity documents are the starting point. The Takeshi Yamamoto papers are masterworks of wartime forgery, authentic paper stock from the 1940s, genuine official seals, credible backstory details. Dr. Nakamura explains to the assembled team, these are not amateurish fakes. Whoever created these had access to real occupation authority stamps, proper document formats, and understood bureaucratic procedures. This level of forgery requires insider knowledge, someone within the administrative apparatus. The second set of papers, the ones bearing Lieutenant General Fujita's name and imperial seal, are unquestionably authentic. Dr. Nakamura cross-references the document numbers with military personnel records held by the Japanese National Institute for Defense Studies. Match confirmed. The paper fiber composition dates correctly to early 1940s Japanese military issue. The photograph matches existing records from Fujita's personnel file. But the key evidence is biometric. Dr. Suksawat's team conducts facial recognition analysis comparing the photograph on Yamamoto's merchant papers with the photograph on Fujita's military identification. Despite age difference, Yamamoto appears older, more weathered. 73 biometric markers match. Probability: 99.97% same individual. The scar above the left eyebrow is particularly distinctive. Fujita's military records note he received that scar during the 1937 Shanghai campaign, shrapnel from a Chinese artillery round. The scar appears identical in both photographs, same length, same angle, same position relative to the eyebrow. April 8, 2024. The investigation expands to the journal, 186 pages of handwritten Japanese text spanning from May 1945 to December 1961. Professor Keiko Tanaka, a handwriting expert from Kyoto University, joins the forensic team. She spends 11 days analyzing the journal entries, comparing them to verified samples of Fujita's handwriting from military documents, personal letters to his wife, preserved in family archives, and logistics reports bearing his signature. Her conclusion, delivered April 19th, is unequivocal. The handwriting in this journal matches Lieutenant General Fujita's authenticated samples with 94% certainty. The writing exhibits his characteristic formation of specific kanji characters, his distinctive method of connecting strokes, and his habit of making small correction marks above characters rather than crossing them out. Additionally, the writing shows natural age progression. The early entries from 1945 show firmer, more controlled strokes, while later entries from the late 1950s and early 1960s exhibit slight tremor consistent with aging. This is not a forgery. These are genuine entries written by Fujita over a 16-year period. The journal's contents are devastating in their clinical detail. The first entry, dated May 7, 1945, written in Mindanao while awaiting transport further south. Third day in Davao safe house. The Chinese merchant network proves reliable thus far. Payment in gold facilitates cooperation wonderfully. Sato and Ishida remain loyal, though I detect their nervousness. They are young and unused to living as ghosts. I feel nothing except the satisfaction of a plan executed successfully. The Americans have Manila. Japan will fall within months, but I will not face their tribunals. Akiko would not want that. She would want me to survive, even if survival means dishonor. Subsequent entries document his journey. Mindanao to Borneo, May 15, 1945. Borneo to Java via Indonesian smuggling routes, June 2, 1945. Java to Singapore on a Dutch merchant vessel whose captain asked no questions about Asian passengers traveling with substantial gold, July 4, 1945. The entry for August 15, 1945, the date of Japan's surrender, is particularly stark. Emperor Hirohito has announced surrender. The war is over. Japan is defeated. I feel no surprise, only confirmation of what logistics mathematics predicted 2 years ago. Sato wept upon hearing the radio broadcast. Ishida became drunk and violent. I had to restrain him, but I feel nothing. The empire for which I swore to die no longer exists. I am a soldier of a vanished nation, a general without army or country. I am Yamamoto now. Fujita died in Manila as planned. This is correct. This is survival. April 24, 2024. The investigation team focuses on the letters, 43 pieces of correspondence, all addressed to my dearest Akiko, written over 16 years. The letters are never sent. They are confessional documents, a widower's conversation with a ghost. Dr. Suksawat reads selected excerpts to the investigation team. From September 1945. Purchase the property today. The Thai coast, far from cities, far from authorities, far from memory. The villa will be built into the hillside, concrete reinforced, with tunnel access to the sea. Paranoia dictates my architecture. I must always have an escape route, even in refuge. The local Thai officials accept my story. A Japanese merchant seeking quiet retirement after the war's disruptions. Yamamoto-san, the quiet foreign gentleman who pays generously and asks for nothing except privacy. I am perfecting the art of invisibility. From March 1946. Sato departed last month. He decided to risk returning to Japan to find his family. I gave him his share of the remaining gold and wished him well. I will never know if he survived the journey or faced arrest as a deserter. Ishida remains, though I sense he grows unstable. The isolation affects him more than he admits, but isolation is safety. Isolation is survival. From July 1950. Ishida hanged himself 3 days ago. I found him in the villa's storage room, his body suspended from a ceiling beam. No note, no explanation, though explanation is unnecessary. 5 years of hiding, 5 years of living as no one, 5 years of watching the ocean and remembering a life that ended. These things destroy the spirit slowly. I buried him in the jungle 2 kilometers inland beneath a banyan tree. No marker, no ceremony. Another ghost in a land of ghosts. Now I am alone. This is acceptable. I have always been alone truly since March 9, 1945, since the night the fire took you and our daughters. May 1, 2024. The investigation reaches its most dramatic revelation when Dr. Nakamura's team in Japan locates Fujita's living descendants. Kenji Fujita, age 78, is the grandson of Lieutenant General Fujita's older brother. He lives in Osaka and works as a retired civil engineer. He possesses family documents that survived the war, including letters from his famous uncle to family members before 1941. At Dr. Nakamura's request, Kenji provides DNA samples, a cheek swab collected by a genetic testing company on May 3rd. These samples are compared against biological material recovered from the villa: strands of hair embedded in an old hairbrush found in the bedroom, dried skin cells on the journal's leather binding, biological residue on clothing fibers preserved in the villa's dry interior chambers. The DNA analysis is conducted by Psi Gene Laboratories in Singapore, a facility specializing in forensic genetics and historical identification. The process takes 3 weeks. Extracting viable DNA from 79-year-old biological samples requires meticulous technique and repeated testing to ensure accuracy. May 27, 2024. The results arrive. Dr. Suksawat convenes the investigation team in Bangkok to review the findings. The laboratory report states, mitochondrial DNA extracted from hair samples at the Thailand villa site shows consistent genetic markers with reference samples provided by Kenji Fujita. Probability of shared maternal lineage, 97.3%. Additional Y chromosome analysis of skin cell DNA indicates patrilineal relationship consistent with uncle-nephew connection. Combined probability that biological material from villa belongs to someone from Lieutenant General Masahiro Fujita's family line, 99.1%. The science confirms what the documents already suggested. The man who lived in the Thai coastal villa, who called himself Takeshi Yamamoto, who wrote letters to his dead wife for 16 years, was Lieutenant General Masahiro Fujita. The official death record from 1945 was wrong. Fujita survived the Battle of Manila, escaped through Southeast Asia, and lived in hiding for nearly 2 decades after the war's end. But the investigation reveals more than just one man's escape. The villa itself contains clues to a larger network. In the tunnel system extending to the shoreline, Thai archaeologists discover artifacts that suggest the villa served as a way station for others. Multiple sets of clothing in different sizes, Japanese military boots in 4 different measurements, a collection of identity papers for various aliases: merchant, teacher, engineer, plantation manager, all bearing different names but showing similar signs of professional forgery. June 3, 2024. Lieutenant Colonel Morrison presents his analysis to the investigation team. He has spent 5 weeks cross-referencing the villa evidence with Allied intelligence files, war crimes investigation records, and Japanese military personnel data from the National Archives in Washington, D.C. His findings are disturbing. At least 14 Japanese officers declared killed in action during the Philippines campaign share suspicious commonalities with Fujita's case. Bodies never recovered, last confirmed sightings during periods of maximum chaos, logistics or administrative backgrounds providing access to resources, and post-war sightings in Southeast Asia that were never conclusively investigated. Morrison identifies 3 specific officers whose stories intersect with evidence found at the villa. Major Yashio Tanaka, logistics officer, declared killed February 1945, Manila. Captain Hiroshi Yamada, Supply Corps, declared killed March 1945, Bataan. And Colonel Kenji Sato, Quartermaster Division, declared killed April 1945, Luzon. All 3 men's names appear in fragmentary notes found in Fujita's journal, entries from 1946 and 1947 referencing T's arrival, Y's departure for Indochina, and K's settling in Bangkok. The implications are clear. Fujita's escape was not isolated. A network existed, an underground railroad for Japanese officers seeking to avoid war crimes tribunals, tribunal investigators, or simply the shame of defeat. The network utilized smuggling routes, bribed officials, forged documents, and safe houses throughout Southeast Asia. The Thai villa was one node in that network, a place where escaping officers could pause, rest, reorganize, and plan their next moves toward permanent anonymity. June 12, 2024. Professor Constantino from the University of the Philippines completes her portion of the investigation, correlating Fujita's logistics operations during the occupation with documented atrocities against Filipino civilians. Her report, delivered to the investigation team and simultaneously submitted to the Philippine Commission on Historical Clarification, is damning. Fujita's requisition orders resulted in the starvation of civilian populations in multiple provinces. His supply distribution priorities favored Japanese military needs while systematically denying resources to Filipino civilians, directly contributing to an estimated 4,200 civilian deaths from malnutrition and related diseases between 1942 and 1945. Additionally, Fujita's logistics network utilized forced labor, Filipino civilians compelled to work in warehouses, docks, and supply depots under brutal conditions that resulted in dozens of documented deaths. Professor Constantino's conclusion: Lieutenant General Masahiro Fujita, while not directly ordering massacres or engaging in the spectacular atrocities that characterized the Battle of Manila's final days, nonetheless bears significant responsibility for systematic policies that caused mass suffering and death. His methodical nature made him effective at the bureaucracy of suffering. Had he faced trial, the evidence would have supported a guilty verdict for crimes against humanity. But Fujita never faced trial. He vanished into Takeshi Yamamoto's anonymous life, living out his years in a hidden villa, writing letters to his dead wife, watching the Andaman Sea from his concrete refuge. The justice system never reached him. The war crimes tribunals never examined his logistics records. He died, according to journal evidence, in December 1961 at age 68, alone in his villa, 16 years after the war ended. The investigation team faces a fundamental question: what to do with these findings? Fujita is long dead. His accomplices are dead. The network that facilitated escapes dissolved decades ago, yet the historical record has been proven false. A documented war criminal lived unpunished for 16 years, and the evidence suggests others did the same. On June 20th, 2024, the Thai government, in coordination with Japanese and Philippine authorities, announces a joint historical commission to fully document the findings. The villa site at Phang Nga will be preserved as a historical location, not a monument, but a memorial to uncomfortable truths about justice delayed and deferred. July 8, 2024. The Joint Historical Commission begins the painstaking work of reconstructing the complete escape network that enabled Fujita and others to vanish after the Pacific War. Lead investigator Dr. Suksawat coordinates with archival researchers in 7 countries: Japan, Philippines, Indonesia, Thailand, Malaysia, Singapore, and the United States. The network's architecture becomes clear through documentary evidence. Shipping manifests, financial records, interrogation transcripts from war crimes trials, intelligence reports from Allied occupation forces, and testimonies from aging witnesses who, in their 90s, finally speak about events they witnessed in the 1940s. The network originated in late 1944, as Japan's defeat became mathematically inevitable to those willing to examine logistics data honestly. It was created not by a single mastermind, but through the convergence of 3 groups with compatible interests. First, Japanese military officers in logistics, supply, and administrative roles who had access to resources and understood that defeat would likely mean war crimes trials. Men like Fujita who wanted survival more than honor. Second, Chinese and Filipino merchant families and smuggling networks that had operated throughout Southeast Asia for generations. These networks saw opportunity for profit in moving desperate Japanese officers who would pay substantial sums for escape assistance. Third, corrupt officials in various occupation governments and neutral territories who could be bribed to provide documents, ignore irregular border crossings, and facilitate the transformation of military officers into civilian merchants, teachers, or plantation managers. The network operated along 3 primary routes, all departing from the Philippines. Route 1. The Southern Current Philippines, right arrow Mindanao, right arrow Borneo, right arrow Java, right arrow Singapore, right arrow Thailand, Indochina. This was Fujita's route, the most developed and reliable. It utilized established smuggling channels, originally created for moving contraband goods between Japanese-occupied territories and neutral zones. Key waypoints included Davao City, Mindanao, safe houses operated by Chinese merchant Chen Weilong's network. Sandakan, Borneo, warehouse complex controlled by the Lim family, who maintained business relationships with both Japanese occupation forces and Allied intelligence, playing all sides. Surabaya, Java, contact point with Dutch-Indonesian networks that would facilitate transport to Singapore. Singapore, the critical hub, where forged identity documents could be purchased, financial arrangements made, and onward travel organized. Final destinations in Thailand, French Indochina, or continuing to Burma. Chen Weilong's testimony, given to Philippine investigators in 1947 during unrelated smuggling charges, briefly mentions transporting Japanese passengers in early 1945, but provides few details. Chen was never charged with war crimes facilitation. The prosecutors at the time didn't pursue smugglers who moved defeated Japanese officers, focusing instead on those who had committed direct atrocities. Chen's network moved an estimated 12 to 18 Japanese officers between February and August 1945, charging between 8 and 15 kilograms of gold per person, depending on rank and urgency. Total profit: approximately 150 to 200 kilograms of gold, worth roughly $2.4 million in 1945 currency, equivalent to over $40 million today. Route 2. The Eastern Current Philippines, right arrow Palau, right arrow Caroline Islands, right arrow Indonesia, right arrow Australia, New Zealand, under false identity. This route was riskier, passing through areas with heavier Allied naval presence, but offered the advantage of eventually reaching countries where Japanese faces among Asian immigrant communities attracted less scrutiny. Evidence for this route comes primarily from Australian immigration records, showing a suspicious cluster of Chinese merchants and Indonesian refugees arriving in 1946-1947, several of whom were later proven to be Japanese nationals who had entered under false documentation. Route 3. The Northern Current Philippines, right arrow Taiwan, right arrow Ryukyu Islands, right arrow mainland Japan, with false identity, or onward to China, Korea. This route was paradoxically the most dangerous because it meant returning to occupied Japan, where Allied authorities were actively processing millions of demobilized soldiers and conducting war crimes investigations. Yet some officers chose this route, calculating that anonymity among millions of returnees was safer than isolation in Southeast Asian hiding spots. Several officers successfully reintegrated into Japanese society under false identities, only being discovered decades later when family inheritance disputes or medical emergencies required producing authentic identity documents. The network's operation required sophisticated financial mechanisms. Gold was the preferred currency, portable, universally valuable, easily divided for payment. But how did escaping officers obtain gold? The answer is uncomfortable. They stole it. Lieutenant General Fujita's logistics position gave him access to what the Japanese military called Kinkafu, the Golden Lily treasure, stolen wealth accumulated from occupied territories. While historians debate the total amount of treasure and its ultimate disposition, documentary evidence confirms that individual officers with logistics authority could divert portions of this wealth for personal use. Fujita's journal contains a chilling entry from March 1945, 1 week after receiving news of his family's death. Conducted inventory of Reserve Depot 7, removed 40 kilograms of bullion from secured storage, documented as transferred to Central Command reserves but actually relocated to personal cash at Pier 7. This is theft by any definition. I am stealing from the emperor's assets, but the emperor sent my daughters into the fire. Akiko burned because the emperor's war demanded it. I will take this gold and I will survive. Call it theft, call it treason. I call it payment for what was taken from me. Financial records discovered in Singaporean banking archives in 2019 reveal the scope of this activity. Between 1945 and 1950, dozens of accounts were opened in Singapore and neutral territories using Japanese names with merchant or civilian occupations. These accounts received deposits of gold, precious metals, or hard currency in amounts that would have been impossible for legitimate merchants to accumulate during wartime. The Singapore Banking Authority estimates that between $15 million and $30 million in current value was deposited through these channels, the liquidated assets of escaped Japanese officers establishing new lives. The network also required document forgers. The investigation identifies Mr. Kobayashi, a Japanese civilian who operated a printing business in Manila before the war and continued operations during occupation. Allied intelligence files from 1946 note Kobayashi as a person of interest for producing false documents but never prosecuted him. Testimony from his grandson, interviewed by researchers in 2024, confirms that Kobayashi created identity papers for between 30 and 50 Japanese officers between late 1944 and mid-1945, charging 1 kilogram of gold per complete identity package, papers, backstory documents, letters of reference. Kobayashi's operation was destroyed in the Battle of Manila. His print shop burned, but the documents he created survived in the pockets and document cases of escaping officers. The Takeshi Yamamoto papers found in Fujita's villa almost certainly came from Kobayashi's workshop, bearing his characteristic attention to detail and his access to genuine bureaucratic seals. The safe houses formed the network's critical infrastructure. The Thai coastal villa where Fujita eventually settled was one of approximately 7 confirmed safe houses along the Southern Current route. Davao, Mindanao, Chen Weilong's warehouse complex, disguised as fish processing facility. Sandakan, Borneo, Lim family compound, officially a rubber plantation office. Batavia, Jakarta, Java Dutch colonial-era building owned by Indonesian businessman with Japanese business connections. Singapore, 3 separate locations in Chinese merchant district, operated by Tan Family Network. Songkhla, Thailand, former Japanese occupation military liaison office, retained after war's end by Thai businessmen who had collaborated with occupation. Phang Nga, Thailand Fujita's villa, purchased July 1945, developed as permanent residence. Saigon, French Indochina, French colonial merchant's townhouse, owner willing to house guests for appropriate payment. Each safe house offered several weeks of shelter, allowing escaping officers to rest, reorganize, and plan their next movement. The houses also served as communication nodes. Messages could be left for other escapees. Intelligence about Allied investigations could be shared, and warnings about compromised routes could be disseminated. The network's effectiveness is measured by its success rate. Of the 18 to 25 officers who investigators believe used the network between February and December 1945, at least 16 successfully disappeared. Only 2 were confirmed captured. Major Sato was arrested in Singapore in 1946, though he faced trial for minor occupation infractions, not war crimes, and served 3 years before release. And Captain Yashida was identified in Bangkok in 1948 but fled before arrest and was never located again. The remaining officers vanished into new identities. Some, like Fujita, lived in isolation. Others integrated into local communities, marrying local women, establishing businesses, raising families who never knew their father's true identity. Several successfully returned to Japan under false names in the early 1950s, blending into a society too busy rebuilding to scrutinize every returnee's background. The network gradually dissolved between 1950 and 1955 as Allied occupation ended, war crimes trials concluded, and the urgency of hunting fugitive Japanese officers diminished. The smuggling networks returned to their traditional business. The safe houses were sold or repurposed. The forged identities became permanent, the false names replacing the real ones until the men who carried them died. But the network's legacy persisted in the form of hidden villas like Fujita's, in bank accounts that remained dormant until descendants discovered them, in occasional discoveries of Japanese military artifacts in unexpected locations, and in family rumors, whispered stories about an uncle who supposedly died in the war but whose body was never found, about a grandfather who seemed to have money despite claiming to be a refugee, about a family friend who spoke Japanese but claimed to be Chinese. The Investigation Commission's final report on the escape network, published August 15, 2024, 79 years to the day after Japan's surrender, concludes, "The network represents a systematic evasion of justice on a scale not previously documented. While individual cases of Japanese officers escaping prosecution were known, the evidence demonstrates an organized infrastructure specifically designed to facilitate such escapes. This network successfully enabled war criminals to avoid accountability, living out their lives unpunished, while their victims and victims' families never received justice. The network's existence challenges the historical narrative that Allied occupation authorities successfully identified and prosecuted Japanese war criminals. In reality, a significant number simply vanished." December 18, 1961. The final entry in Lieutenant General Masahiro Fujita's journal, written in increasingly shaky handwriting. 17 years since Manila. 17 years since I became Yamamoto. I am 68 years old. My body fails, pain in chest, difficulty breathing, hands that shake too much to write clearly. No doctor, no hospital. Yamamoto cannot see doctors. Doctors ask questions, examine records, create documentation. Fujita must remain dead. I walk to the beach each morning when strength permits. The ocean is eternal, indifferent to human suffering. Waves that touch this shore also touched Philippines' beaches, Japanese shores, touched the water where Akiko's ashes might have settled if anything remained to settle after the firestorm. The ocean connects all graves. 16 years alone. Ishida has been gone 11 years. No visitors, no friends, no contact with former life. The Thai villagers know me as the strange foreign hermit who pays for supplies and asks nothing else. They respect my privacy because I am generous. Gold purchases silence as effectively as it purchases escape. Was survival worth the cost? I avoided trial. I avoided execution. I lived when death surrounded me. But what life is this? Watching ocean, writing letters to a ghost, remembering daughters whose voices I can no longer hear clearly in memory, preserving a false identity that has become more real than the general I once was. If someone discovers this journal, if this villa is found after I am gone, let them know. Lieutenant General Masahiro Fujita was not a monster. He was a man who loved his wife, who cherished his daughters, who served his emperor with devotion and expertise. The empire demanded things that transformed devotion into atrocity, expertise into mechanisms of suffering. The requisition orders I signed, the supply priorities I established, the logistics I optimized. These were the mathematics of war, but mathematics applied to human lives. I could claim I was following orders. I could claim I didn't understand the full consequences. But I am too old for such lies, even to myself. I knew. Every logistics officer knows. When you optimize supply distribution to favor military needs over civilian survival, you are choosing who dies. I made those choices efficiently, methodically, without permitting emotion to interfere with calculations. And then Tokyo burned, and my family died, and suddenly the calculations meant something different. I will not apologize. The dead cannot apologize meaningfully, but I will confess, I was not innocent. Survival does not equal absolution. Escape does not equal justice. I have lived 17 years as a dead man, which is perhaps its own form of judgment. The pain increases. Soon, I think. Days, perhaps weeks. Yamamoto will die alone in his villa and no one will know, and eventually someone will find a skeleton and wonder who this was. Let them wonder. Let this journal provide answers. Let someone know that Fujita didn't die in Manila, but also that he didn't really survive. The man who walked out of those flames was already a ghost. To Akiko, to Yuki, to Hana, I will join you soon. I hope, though I do not believe, that there is something after death, that you wait for me, that reunion is possible. But I think there is only darkness, only the indifference of the universe, only the ocean's eternal rhythm erasing all traces of human drama. This is the final entry. This is the end of Lieutenant General Masahiro Fujita, who died February 12, 1945 in Manila, exactly as the official record states. What lived afterward was something else. A shadow, a ghost, a man named Yamamoto who was never quite real. Sayonara. The journal entry ends there. Based on carbon dating of dust accumulation and decomposition analysis conducted by Thai forensic specialists, investigators estimate Fujita died between December 20th and December 28th, 1961. His body decomposed naturally in the villa's interior. The structure's sealed design and Thailand's tropical heat accelerated the process. By the time the villa was discovered in March 2024, only bone fragments remained, scattered by small animals that had entered through deteriorated ventilation shafts. The investigation team attempts to reconstruct Fujita's life during those 16 years of exile. The evidence is fragmentary. Journal entries, letters never sent, financial records from occasional supply purchases in nearby Thai villages, and testimony from elderly Thai villagers who remember the foreign hermit from their childhood. Prasert Chaeyoung, age 83, interviewed July 2024, recalls, "My grandfather sometimes brought supplies to the foreign man in the hidden house. This was in the 1950s when I was a boy. The foreign man always paid with small gold pieces, very unusual. He spoke Thai poorly with strange accent. He wanted fish, rice, vegetables, lamp oil. Never wanted company, never invited us inside. My grandfather said he was a soldier running from war ghosts. We didn't ask questions. Gold means you don't ask questions." Bank records from Bangkok, declassified for the investigation, show that Takeshi Yamamoto maintained a modest account at the Siam Commercial Bank from 1946 to 1961. Deposits were irregular, small amounts of gold converted to Thai baht, never large enough to attract attention. Total deposits over 15 years, approximately 4.3 kilograms of gold, equivalent to roughly $70,000 in contemporary currency. Withdrawals were equally modest, enough for basic living expenses, property taxes on the villa, occasional equipment purchases. The financial records suggest Fujita lived simply. The 40 kilograms of gold he extracted from the Pier 7 depot in 1945 was divided. Approximately 10 kilograms to Chen Wei Long for transport, 5 kilograms to Sato and Ishida, 8 to 10 kilograms converted and spent during the escape journey and villa construction, leaving roughly 15 to 17 kilograms for long-term survival. The gold was sufficient to sustain a hermit lifestyle indefinitely. The question of why Fujita never attempted to contact surviving family members in Japan, his older brother, his sister, is answered partially in a journal entry from August 1948. Temptation to write to Taro, his older brother, remained strong. To let family know I survived, to break the isolation, to hear news of homeland. But contact creates danger. A letter can be traced. A message can be intercepted. If authorities discover I live, they will hunt me. And not just me, family could face charges for harboring knowledge of fugitive. My survival must remain absolute secret. This is the price, complete severance from former life. Fujita is dead. The dead do not write letters. Yet Fujita maintained connection to his past through ritual. The villa contained a small Buddhist shrine, discovered by archaeologists in the main living chamber. The shrine held photographs of Akiko, Yuki, and Hana, images Fujita must have carried throughout his escape. Fresh flower offerings had been placed regularly. Thai botanists analyzing pollen residue on the shrine's surface confirm offerings continued until approximately 1961, the year of Fujita's death. The 43 letters to Akiko, never sent, never meant to be sent, served as Fujita's psychological lifeline, a way to maintain relationship with the woman whose death defined his post-war existence. The letters are not apologetic. Rather, they are conversational, describing daily life, reflecting on memories, discussing the moral weight of survival. From March 1955, 10 years since you died, 10 years I have survived. I think often about balance. What would you want? Would you want me to surrender to authorities, to accept execution as justice for the suffering my logistics enabled? Would you want me to live as I do, alone but alive? I think you would simply want our daughters back. I think you would trade my life and yours and everyone's to have Yuki and Hana restored. But that bargain is not offered. We work with the choices available, not the choices desired. From November 1958, watch storm over ocean today. Lightning strikes water, tremendous display of natural violence. Then nothing, ocean absorbs the lightning as if it never happened. I think we are all lightning. Bright, violent, momentarily significant, then absorbed by darkness and forgot. The empire struck the Pacific like lightning, then was absorbed. Millions died, cities burned, then ocean and time absorbed it all. In another century, who will remember? Who will care about Lieutenant General Fujita, or Yamamoto, or any of us? The investigation attempts to confirm whether Fujita had contact with other escaped officers during his Thai exile. No definitive evidence emerges, but suggestive clues exist. A journal entry from September 1952 mentions visitor from the north, a man who shared memories of home and circumstances that drove us both to exile. No name is provided, but the timing correlates with intelligence reports of another suspected fugitive officer, Colonel Tanaka, operating in Thailand during the early 1950s. Similarly, a 1957 entry references news that K has passed. Illness took him in Bangkok, likely referring to Colonel Kenji Sato, whose death certificate, discovered in Thai civil records, shows a Kenji Suzuki dying of tuberculosis in Bangkok, March 1957. The photograph on Suzuki's death certificate shows a man bearing strong resemblance to pre-war photographs of Colonel Sato from Japanese military archives. These fragmentary connections suggest that escaped officers maintained loose communication networks even in exile, sharing information about Allied investigations, warning each other of threats, perhaps even providing assistance when one of their number faced crisis. But the network was never formalized. Paranoia about exposure kept relationships minimal and documentation non-existent. Fujita's death in December 1961 apparently went unnoticed for weeks. The villa was isolated, and Fujita had trained local suppliers not to expect regular contact. By the time concern might have developed, when monthly supplies remained uncollected in January 1962, anyone who might have investigated likely assumed the foreign hermit had simply departed, perhaps returning to wherever he came from. The villa was gradually reclaimed by jungle growth. Tropical vegetation covered the concrete structure within years. By the 1970s, the villa was completely hidden, unknown to newer generations of Thai coastal residents, forgotten except perhaps in the fading memories of elderly villagers who remembered stories about a foreign man who lived alone and paid with gold. For 63 years, from Fujita's death in 1961 until the villa's discovery in 2024, the site remained undisturbed. The journal, the letters, the photographs, the identity papers, all preserved in the sealed steel case, waiting for the moment when excavators would break through the earth and reveal secrets that their author perhaps wanted discovered eventually, if only to prove that he had existed, that his escape had succeeded, that Lieutenant General Masahiro Fujita had defied the official record and lived, if such isolated existence could be called living. The discovery of Lieutenant General Fujita's hidden villa and the revelation of his 16-year survival force uncomfortable questions about justice, accountability, and the moral mathematics of war. Dr. Suksawat addresses these questions in a public lecture at Chulalongkorn University, Bangkok, September 2024. We are confronted with a man who was simultaneously perpetrator and victim. Fujita's logistics decisions contributed to civilian deaths. This is documented, undeniable. Yet his family was killed by American firebombing, also documented, also undeniable. He escaped justice for his crimes. But what justice would have been appropriate? Execution. Imprisonment. Does the suffering he endured constitute any form of payment? These are questions without satisfactory answers. Professor Constantino from the University of the Philippines offers a sharper perspective. 4,200 Filipino civilians died as a direct result of Fujita's requisition policies. Those victims never escaped. Their families never received compensation or acknowledgement. Fujita's personal tragedy, and it was a tragedy, does not absolve him of responsibility for that suffering. He chose escape over accountability. That choice meant his victims never received justice. We must remember them, not just him. The ethical complexity intensifies when considering Fujita's apparent awareness of his moral position. The journal entries demonstrate that he understood his culpability. He did not claim innocence or justify his wartime actions through obedience to orders. In an entry from October 1954, he writes, "Read news of war crimes trials finally concluding. So many executed, so many imprisoned. I evaded that judgment. Was I more guilty or less guilty than those who faced tribunals? I think the question is meaningless. We were all instruments of a national policy that demanded brutality. Some implemented that policy through direct violence, massacres, torture, executions. I implemented it through bureaucratic efficiency, supply chains that fed soldiers but starved civilians. Different methods, same moral weight. They were caught, I was not. This is luck, not justice." This self-awareness complicates simple moral categorization. Fujita was not a concentration camp commandant or massacre organizer. His crimes were the banal crimes of logistics, the violence of forms and requisitions, and supply distribution formulas. Yet the body count attributed to his efficiency rivals that of more dramatically violent perpetrators. Lieutenant Colonel Morrison, in his contribution to the Investigation Commission's final report, places Fujita in historical context. The Pacific War produced between 3 and 14 million civilian casualties, depending on which populations and territories are counted. The vast majority of these deaths resulted not from combat but from disease, starvation, and deprivation caused by military occupation policies. Officers like Fujita, who managed logistics and supply systems, bear collective responsibility for these deaths. Yet because their crimes were administrative rather than directly violent, they have often been overlooked by history. Fujita's case forces us to recognize that bureaucratic violence is still violence, that optimized suffering is still suffering. The question of other escaped officers haunts the investigation. If Fujita successfully evaded justice through the escape network, how many others did as well? The commission identifies at least 14 officers with suspicious death records and post-war sightings. But how many more disappeared without leaving evidence? How many merchants and teachers and refugees living throughout Southeast Asia and beyond were actually war criminals hiding in plain sight? This question is never fully answered. The historical record is too fragmented, the documentation too sparse, the witnesses too few and too old. But the investigation's revelations suggest that the commonly accepted narrative, that Allied occupation authorities successfully identified and prosecuted Japanese war criminals, is incomplete at best. Dr. Nakamura estimates, based on the evidence from Fujita's case and similar documented escapes, I believe between 50 and 200 Japanese officers successfully evaded justice through escape networks after the war. Some lived under false identities for decades. Some even returned to Japan under new names. Most are dead now. Their secrets died with them. We will never know the complete truth. The moral question extends beyond Fujita individually to the network that enabled his escape. Chen Wei-long and others who transported fugitive officers were motivated by profit, not ideology. They saw business opportunity in desperate men with gold. Should they be judged as accomplices to justice evasion? Or were they simply opportunistic entrepreneurs in a chaotic post-war environment? Thai and Philippine historians debated this question during commission proceedings. The consensus position, articulated by Dr. Suksawat, the network operators were neither heroes nor villains. They were amoral facilitators who prioritized profit over justice. They enabled war criminals to escape, but they also helped some officers who were guilty of nothing except being on the losing side. Moral judgment of the network requires distinguishing between cases, which is impossible at this historical distance. Another uncomfortable question: would capturing and executing Fujita in 1945 or 1946 have constituted justice? He would have been one more name on the tribunal execution lists, one more officer hanged or imprisoned. The Filipino victims of his requisition policies would still be dead. Their families would still have received no compensation. Would Fujita's execution have provided meaningful justice, or merely satisfied the abstract principle that perpetrators should face consequences? This question divides the investigation commission. Some members argue that justice requires accountability regardless of practical outcomes, that allowing perpetrators to escape undermines the entire framework of international law. Others suggest that by 2024, with all direct parties dead, the concept of justice has transformed from punishment to historical truth-telling. The Japanese government's official response, issued October 2024, walks a careful line. The historical record must be corrected. Lieutenant General Masahiro Fujita did not die in 1945 as previously believed. His survival and subsequent evasion of war crimes investigation is regrettable and represents a failure of post-war justice mechanisms. However, at this historical distance, the appropriate response is acknowledgement, documentation, and commitment to ensuring such evasions do not occur in future conflicts. The Japanese government expresses remorse for all suffering caused by military policies during the Pacific War, including policies implemented by Lieutenant General Fujita. The Philippine government's response is sharper. The revelation that Lieutenant General Fujita lived unpunished for 16 years after the war, while his victims and their families suffered without justice or acknowledgement, is painful for the Filipino people. This case demonstrates the incomplete nature of post-war accountability and the need for continued historical investigation to reveal other such cases. Justice delayed is justice denied, but truth revealed, even decades later, has value. The villa site itself becomes a focal point for debate about appropriate memorialization. Should it be preserved as a historical site? If so, how should it be presented? As a monument to Fujita's clever escape, as a memorial to the victims of his logistics policies, as a neutral historical artifact. The Thai government, in consultation with Japanese and Philippine representatives, decides on a compromise. The villa will be preserved as the Phang Nga Historical Truth Site, with exhibits documenting both Fujita's escape and the Filipino civilian casualties resulting from his wartime logistics operations. The site presentation explicitly avoids glorifying Fujita while acknowledging the historical significance of the discovery. The exhibit includes photographs of Filipino families who died from malnutrition during the occupation, faces and names to counter the abstraction of requisition policies, and supply distribution. It includes Fujita's journal entries showing his awareness of moral culpability. It includes the letters to his dead wife, documenting his isolation and psychological deterioration. And it includes factual documentation of the escape network, presented as historical information rather than adventure narrative. At the site's opening ceremony, November 11, 2024, Dr. Suksawat delivers the keynote address. This place represents the complexity of history. It is not a shrine to a clever escape or a monument to inevitable justice. It is a reminder that war creates moral tangles that outlast combat, that personal tragedy does not excuse collective responsibility, and that the truth, however uncomfortable, deserves documentation. Lieutenant General Fujita escaped legal judgment, but he could not escape moral weight. His 16 years of isolated survival were perhaps their own form of judgment, though not the judgment his victims deserved. The ceremony includes representatives from Filipino families whose ancestors died during the occupation. Their presence ensures that the site's meaning remains anchored in accountability rather than fascination with escape narratives. March 17, 2025. Exactly 1 year after construction workers first broke ground and discovered the hidden villa. The Phang Nga Historical Truth Site has received over 45,000 visitors during its first 3 months of operation. School groups from Thailand, Japan, and the Philippines visit to study the complex history. Historians arrive to examine the preserved documents. Descendants of both Japanese officers and Filipino victims stand in the same rooms, confronting a shared history of suffering and survival. The villa's concrete walls, once hidden beneath jungle growth, now stand exposed beneath a protective canopy designed to shield the structure while maintaining its historical integrity. The tunnel to the sea remains open, allowing visitors to walk the escape route that Fujita maintained for 16 years, just in case he needed to run one more time. In the main chamber, behind reinforced glass, the journal lies open to its final entry. Fujita's shaky handwriting testifies to his physical deterioration in December 1961. Visitors stand silently before the display, reading the words of a man confronting mortality and moral complexity. The steel document case that preserved the evidence for 79 years occupies its own display. Serial number JA091945M, Japanese military issue. A container designed to protect documents from moisture, fire, and time. It succeeded beyond its designer's imaginations, keeping secrets sealed until the moment when earth-moving equipment and archaeological science would converge to reveal them. Dr. Suksawat visits the site regularly. She stands on the hillside above the villa, looking out at the Andaman Sea that Fujita watched for 16 years. The ocean is indifferent to human drama. Waves arrive and depart with metronomic regularity, unaffected by the stories of escape and exile and moral reckoning that unfolded on its shores. The ocean kept his secret, Dr. Suksawat reflects in an interview with NHK recorded at the site in February 2025. The jungle kept his secret. Time and isolation kept his secret, but secrets demand enormous energy to maintain. Fujita spent 16 years ensuring his secret would hold. He succeeded, but at the cost of living as a ghost. The secret kept him as much as he kept it. The investigation officially concludes in December 2024, but research continues. Historians in multiple countries follow leads suggested by Fujita's case, searching for evidence of other escapes, other hidden villas, other lives lived under false names. Each discovery adds complexity to the historical record, challenging simple narratives about post-war justice and accountability. Kenji Fujita, the general's grandnephew, visits the site in January 2025. He is the family member who provided DNA samples that helped confirm his uncle's identity. He stands in the villa where his great-uncle lived and died, reading the letters addressed to Akiko, studying the photographs of the family destroyed by fire. "I feel strange," he tells reporters. "Pride that my uncle survived such danger, shame that he evaded justice for his crimes, sadness for his loneliness and suffering, anger at the war that created these impossible choices. All these feelings exist simultaneously, contradicting each other. Maybe that's appropriate. History is not simple. People are not simple. My uncle was not a monster, but he did monstrous things. He suffered terribly, but he escaped consequences for causing suffering." How do we hold all these truths together? This is perhaps the question that Fujita's villa ultimately poses. Not a simple question of good versus evil, justice versus escape, perpetrator versus victim, but rather the complex question of how to acknowledge moral contradiction, how to document uncomfortable truths, how to remember history that resists easy categorization. The Filipino families whose ancestors died from requisition policies implemented by Fujita's logistics division face similar complexity. Maria Santos, age 72, whose grandmother died of starvation in 1944 due to Japanese supply requisitions, visits the site in October 2024. "For many years, I was angry that the Japanese officer responsible was never punished," she says. "Learning that he actually survived made me angry again. But standing here, reading his words about losing his wife and daughters, seeing how he lived in isolation for 16 years, I don't know. I don't forgive him. My Lola grandmother died because of his orders. But maybe I understand now that war creates only victims, some guilty and some innocent, but all damaged. He was both perpetrator and victim. So was my Lola in a different way. The war devoured everyone." As the sun sets over Fang and Ga, casting long shadows across the villa's concrete walls, guides prepare to close the site for the day. Tomorrow, more visitors will arrive, more school groups will study the exhibits, more researchers will examine documents. The process of historical reckoning continues, incremental and ongoing. The ocean that Fujita watched for 16 years continues its eternal rhythm, waves arriving precisely every 11 seconds, as they have for millions of years, as they will for millions more. Human drama plays out on the shore, escape and exile, justice and evasion, guilt and suffering, and the ocean absorbs it all, indifferent and eternal. Sometimes the earth keeps secrets for 79 years, sealed in steel cases and buried beneath jungle growth, waiting for the precise moment when excavators and archaeologists and historical truth converge. Sometimes those secrets, when finally revealed, raise more questions than they answer. And sometimes that is exactly what history requires. Not comfortable narratives with clear moral lessons, but complex truths that force us to confront the messy reality of human choice, consequence, and survival. Lieutenant General Masahiro Fujita died twice. First in February 1945, according to official record, consumed by flames in Manila's destruction. Second in December 1961, in a hidden villa on the Thai coast, alone with his ghosts and his gold and his unanswered questions about whether survival constituted victory or merely prolonged defeat. The first death was a lie. The second death was the truth. But between those two deaths lies 16 years of existence that defies simple judgment, a life lived in the shadows, a secret maintained through isolation, a man who escaped justice but could never escape himself. The villa stands as testament to that complicated truth, its concrete walls enduring while everything else, the empire, the war, the men who fought it, the certainties that justified it, dissolved into history. And the question it poses to every visitor, to every researcher, to everyone who studies the Pacific War and its aftermath: how many other villas remain undiscovered? How many other secrets does the earth still keep? How many other lives were lived in the gap between official death and actual survival. The investigation provided some answers, but the larger questions about justice and accountability, about suffering and survival, about the moral weight of choices made in impossible circumstances, these questions remain open, complicated, resistant to resolution. Perhaps that is fitting. Perhaps history's value lies not in providing comfortable answers, but in forcing us to sit with uncomfortable questions, to acknowledge moral complexity, to remember that the distance between perpetrator and victim, between guilty and innocent, between condemned and escaped, is sometimes smaller than we want to believe. The ocean knows these truths, if oceans can know anything. It knows that sometimes Manila burns and generals escape and secrets remain hidden for 79 years. It knows that human drama is brief and violent and eventually absorbed into darkness. It knows that memory and forgetting are both forms of tide, arriving and departing with mathematical precision, reshaping shores and histories with patient, indifferent force. And now we know too, because the earth revealed what it had hidden, because construction workers and archaeologists and historians did their work, because Lieutenant General Masahiro Fujita left evidence of his survival even while he tried to disappear. We know, and knowing changes nothing and everything. The dead remain dead. Justice remains undelivered. But the historical record is corrected, the truth is documented, and the conversation about accountability and complexity continues. Sometimes that is the only justice history can provide. Not punishment or vindication, but simply truth, however complicated, however uncomfortable, however incomplete. The villa stands, the ocean watches, the secrets are revealed. And somewhere in the earth, in the jungle, in the forgotten corners of Southeast Asia, other villas perhaps remain hidden. Other secrets wait for their moment of revelation. Other ghosts inhabit the gap between official history and actual truth. The excavators will find them eventually, or they won't. The earth keeps its secrets for as long as it chooses, then surrenders them when bulldozers and archaeologists and time converge. 79 years. That's how long it took for Lieutenant General Fujita's secret to emerge. How many more years until the next revelation? How many more hidden villas, false identities, escaped perpetrators, uncomfortable truths? The earth knows, the earth waits, and eventually, inevitably, the earth speaks. We just have to be ready to listen.